Hello everyone, welcome to this month's video. So last month I showed you my favourite stretching routine, and at the end of that video I kind of told you that stretching might not be all that it's cracked up to be. And I promised you guys that I would send a new article this month explaining my reason behind this. So essentially there was a study that came out in 2017 by Baxter et al. And he reviewed all the research on stretching and its impact on flexibility, performance and injury risk in runners. And I'll go through the results with you now. So stretching and flexibility. So he basically found that stretching can increase flexibility, but it has to be a really strict program that you do over a long period of time. So, it might take up to 12 weeks until you actually see any improvements. I think they found that 6 weeks was the minimum you can have until you get improvements. They also found that stretching, there was a different study by Alfonso that was published this year in 2021, and they actually found that stretching isn't superior to strength training in increasing your range of motion and flexibility. So if you go to the gym and do like a bunch of squats and deadlifts and things like that, your flexibility will increase by doing that as much as it would do if you were to go to the gym and just do some stretching. They also found in the study by Baxter that elite runners are actually less flexible than recreational runners. So you kind of want to be stiff and inflexible to run quicker. So how that works essentially is if your muscle's stiff, it holds more elastic energy. So when your foot hits the ground, you get a bit more recoil and energy back from your muscle. So the way to think about that is with elastic band. So if your muscle's stiff and it stretches, it'll ping straight back and you'll get the energy back. Whereas if it's flexible, it'll stretch, but it won't ping back to the same amount of energy. So you won't be getting as much energy back from your muscle. So being stiff actually increases your running economy. So another thing they found in this study is that having reduced flexibility doesn't actually increase your risk of injury. So if you have stiff muscles, you're not going to get more injured than someone that has flexible muscles. This is only the case in like the normal population. So if you're extremely tight, then you might have increased risk. So if you try and touch your toes and your hands when you reach your knees, then you might be a little bit more risk of getting injured than someone that can touch their toes. So the research paper also showed that stretching doesn't actually reduce the sensation of muscle soreness, or to be specific, DOMS, which is delayed onset muscle soreness. So that's something you get commonly after a heavy workout. So if you go to the gym and again do a load of heavy squats and heavy deadlifts, and the next day you're feeling really sore, stretching doesn't decrease that soreness and it doesn't speed up the time that it takes to go. So yeah, if you think that stretching's going to increase the DOMS, it doesn't. The best thing to do to get rid of DOMS is actually to do light exercise. Okay, so the study by Baxter also looked at stretching and performance, and they looked at two things. So stretching before the event as a kind of warm-up to prepare yourself for the event, and stretching as a kind of long-term program that will improve your performance over time. So for the warm-up aspect, they essentially some studies found that if you stretch, it actually reduces your elasticity, so the ability of your muscles to kind of ping back. So if that reduces, it will then reduce your running economy and then reduce your performance. However, the studies don't know how much effect this actually has. So it's probably so tiny that it won't actually affect your performance at all. So if you're just a recreational runner and you stretch a little bit before a run, you're not going to run slower on that run than if you did stretch, or didn't stretch, sorry. There's some studies, however, that actually said stretching can improve your performance, as stretching helps with the recruitment of muscles. So what recruitment of muscles mean is essentially you have nerves that innervate your muscle, and when the message from your brain down the nerve goes into your muscle to get it to contract, the more efficient that is, the more muscle is going to contract and the stronger force you're going to get. So when you run, you'll run more efficiently and with more power. So some people have argued that this recruitment of muscle is more efficient. However, again, they haven't quantified how much. So if it does happen, the effects are probably so minuscule that you're not going to notice. So if you do stretch, it's not going to make you any quicker than if you don't stretch. So essentially the overall message is Stretching before a race or run isn't going to make any difference. The best thing to do in the warm-up is probably just to go for a light jog, like around like 10 to 15 minutes, to get your heart rate up and prepare your body to run at increased heart rate, and it also warms up your muscles. So yeah, don't waste your time stretching loads before a race. On the second thing, so does a long-term stretching program improve your performance over time? Again, they found that it doesn't. So even if you do manage to increase your flexibility by doing a lot of stretching, it's not gonna make you run any quicker or have an effect on your running economy. So the last thing that Baxter et al. Looked at was stretching and injury risk. So can stretching decrease your risk of getting injured as a runner? There's a small bit of evidence that suggests that stretching can decrease injury in explosive sports. So if you're a sprinter or like a weightlifter or powerlifter or something like that, then it can reduce your injury by a tiny amount. But this doesn't translate to distance running because you're using your muscles in a different way. You don't need that explosive power. You just need that constant use of kind of moderate power. So you're not at risk of like tearing a muscle. So if you're a sprinter, going from a length of muscle to a shorter muscle to create as much power as possible can risk you tearing it. But that risk is a lot lower in a middle distance athlete. That's why stretching doesn't really make much difference to injury risk in terms of acute kind of muscle tears and things like that. There's no evidence to suggest that stretching can reduce injury risk in endurance sports. So things like swimming, cycling, running, stretching isn't going to stop you from getting injured. So the current research by Baxter shows that stretching has little effects on performance, injury risk, and reducing the sensation of DOMS. But it can increase your flexibility as long as you do it religiously for at least 6 weeks. However, this study was done in healthy population groups. So it takes like thousands of people without any injuries and test if it makes any difference. So you can't really translate this to individual people and people with injuries. So there might be, there's injuries out there or conditions out there where stretching, can have effect on pain and things like that. So I know with my mum who doesn't suffer, but my mum has osteoarthritis in her knees, and she says that stretching really helps reduce the pain that she gets when she's laying in bed at night. So, just because a research paper says it doesn't work doesn't mean it's not going to work for you as an individual, because it works for her. I myself as well, I do that stretching routine that I showed you a month ago, and I do find that if I do that after a heavy workout in the gym or after a long run, it does feel good, and it does, for me, reduce the sensation of muscle soreness. It might not make me run quicker, and it might not increase my flexibility if I don't do it regularly, but for me I find it beneficial as it just makes me feel a little bit more fresh during the week, especially when I'm doing a high mileage week of running. So there we go. I think the take home message is you don't need to stretch for hours and hours like some people say. Just stretch to help reduce that sensation of DOMS and tightness, and if you find that it works for you, then you should keep doing it. But don't feel like you have to have it in your training to run quick, because the research suggests otherwise. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this video.